Webster defines crunch time as a critical moment or period, like the end of a game, when decisive action is needed. Every sports fan knows this time in the game. Your palms sweat just a little more, your heart races just a little bit faster, and you live and die with every play until the final seconds tick off the clock and you're either celebrating a victory or disappointed by the defeat. The team at Crunch Time Sports Advantage Network understands just how critical these moments are. For us, it begins as soon as the next set of games are on the board. We evaluate the opening lines and any breaking news throughout the week. We cover each game inside and out, whether it's from inside the locker room to a huddle down on the field, the court, or the ice. We take you inside the meeting room with scouts, coaches, and executives. We have our fingers on the pulse of all the sports that we cover: the National Hockey League, NBA, college basketball, college football, and the National Football League. We are the Crunch Time Sports Advantage Network, and we're here to help you find your sports advantage. After all the data has been crunched, we then turn it over to Kenneth for the best analysis around. His unique perspective in both understanding the data and how it applies to the game and how you win is the Crunch Time Sports Advantage. Are you ready? The Crunch Time Jet is fueled and ready for takeoff, and the Crunch Time Express is about to leave the station. Your VIP pass has been approved, so all aboard.
Welcome to the 2024 College Football Team Autopsy Report. An autopsy report is a document that summarizes the findings of an autopsy, an examination of a body after death. It includes details of the examination, tests, and observations performed, as well as the cause and manner of death. Just like a real autopsy report, the Crunch Time Sports Advantage Network College Football Autopsy Report examines a team's body of work after the season has concluded. This report includes a review of the team's season win total and whether they met expectations, key offensive, defensive, and special teams metrics that shaped the season, a deep dive into coaching decisions, including situational play and fourth down aggressiveness, a final season grade, evaluating execution, performance in key moments, and consistency, the final verdict, analyzing what went right, what went wrong, and what must be fixed for 2025. With the 2024 season in the rearview mirror, it's time to examine the patient. To present the findings, we have called in our Chief Medical Examiner and Senior Analyst, Kenneth.
And welcome back in, ladies and gentlemen, to the 2024 Team Autopsy Report. We have the Mississippi State Bulldogs on the autopsy table, and folks, a lot to unpack this team, and I got you for the next 27 minutes to do so. So let's not waste any time. If you're watching this on our YouTube channel, thank you so much. If you're streaming this on our Twitter feed at Crunch Time VIP, thank you as well. If you're listening on your favorite podcast platform, thank you for joining us. Anything that I reference that will be on the screen, don't worry, podcast listeners, I will always have you covered. Let's start right there with the head coach, Jeff Lebby. Now, a little backstory with this program. With the untimely passing of Mike Leach, and when I say they, the fan base and the powers to be at Mississippi State wanted somebody to run kind of Leach's offense, that air raid offense. Well, that's why they fired the previous head coach after 1 year and bring in Jeff Lebby. We know his first year there, very difficult, 2-10. And it's really hard to run that air raid system in a conference like the Southeastern Conference because you're playing against teams with really athletic defensive linemen that can get into those gaps really quickly, and linebackers and safeties that can absolutely cover kind of like kind of like corners. So that's where running the air raid in this league gets a little more challenging. So let's go to where we always like to start. And if this is your first time with us, thank you. We'll follow the same recipe throughout all of these team autopsy reports. We'll start right there with the betting window. This team back in June had a season win total of 4.5. We know only winning 2 games, fell way short of that. Now, when we look at our in-season composite win total, 3 very unique but very predictive data points gives us a team's in-season win total. We actually still had the Bulldogs as a 4-win team, so still 2 games short of that. Now, let's take a look at some deep scheduling data points here. You'll hear me talk about this quite a bit. A team's strength of schedule and a team's strength of record. Basically, your strength of schedule, the way that we calculate it, is looking at the quality of the teams from a power ranking standpoint on your schedule. And when we look at Mississippi State, a strength of schedule of 0.582 was the 9th toughest in Division I football. Now, the part of your strength of schedule you can control is your non-conference. Did you play some quality opponents, or did you load up on some winnable games? Judging by Mississippi State's, I'm going to lean more towards they played a more quality schedule as well in the non-conference, as well as facing that gauntlet in the Southeastern Conference. Now, when we look at the strength of record, this is something that you absolutely have no control over. It's basically, how did your opponents perform during their season? And when we look at a team that has a strength of record of 0.674, that is the 3rd toughest in all of college football. So when we go to this next slide here, you'll see a lot of Mississippi State's opponents with some really good records. So let's walk through it right here, right now. We throw out the FCS opponent in Eastern Kentucky. You look at Arizona State, 10-2. Toledo was 7-5. The Florida Gators were 7-5. Texas was 11-1. Georgia was 10-2. Texas A&M was 8-4. Arkansas was 6-6. UMass was the only team on this team's schedule that did not make a bowl game last year at 2-10. Tennessee was 10-2. Missouri, and then ending the regular season with in-state rival Ole Miss in the Egg Bowl, both of those teams were 9-3. So when I said this was the 3rd toughest strength of record schedule, as I just laid it out, only one team did not have a bowl appearance out of this group. Now, let's take a look at how good were the defenses that Mississippi State went up against. We talked about the record, but now let's take a look at it from a pure power ranking standpoint, the way that we calculate it. We use a baseline number of 68 because that's how many Power 4 teams there were in Division I football last year. So let's walk through it. Arizona State, was 24th. Florida was the 17th best defense in college football for us last year. Texas was number 2. Georgia was number 5. No surprise there. Texas A&M, with that defense that they had, was 30th. Arkansas was 44th. Tennessee, 3rd. Missouri, 20th. And then Ole Miss, 4th. You're talking about 9 of their opponents inside of that number. And when you talk about an average power ranking of 32, this is a fringe top 25 defense on a weekly basis that they would have faced on average. Looking at a defense that's probably on a team that is worst case 8-4, possibly contending to be a 9-3 team. When you look at their wins outside of the FCS opponent in Eastern Kentucky, their only other win came against another 2-win team in UMass. Now, I said that they were 2 games off of our composite win total. Let's see if we can take a look at their schedule really quickly and see if we can spot a couple of potential wins that they may have been able to pull off here. I'll take a look at the game against Texas A&M. That was a really tight ball game. maybe if some things go differently, they could have pulled that out. If you had to look at another one-score game that potentially could have gone the way of Mississippi State, you'd probably have to go back to that early season matchup against Arizona State, and how would that have changed the fortunes of both of those programs if Mississippi State is able to get that win? So something to think about once we start diving deeper into these numbers. All right, let's dive into the offense. And what I'm going to do for the offense is I'm going to go through the NCAA average, Mississippi State's data point in that category. We'll call that the accounting stats number, and then we'll give you our adjusted number for that category. So average team last year scored about 28 points per game. Mississippi State was at 25.8. So a little bit off of that. But when we adjust for opponent, actually goes up a little bit and gets them over that average to 29.7. So facing a high caliber defenses, you're probably going to see some of their numbers get adjusted up. Now, looking at the passing yards per game, and this is something that Mississippi State, especially under Leach, and what Levy wants to do is they want to have a lot of those passing yards. So average team was about 227 yards per game last year. Mississippi State, both by their accounting stats and our adjusted numbers, identical, 239 yards per game passing. As far as the running game goes, now this is something that Leach never believed in running the ball. So the average team last year, about 160 yards per game. When we look at Mississippi State, 138 yards per game rushing. But when we adjust that for opponent, this team was actually a really good running team, 187 yards per game, almost a 50-yard per game improvement there. So we'll take a look at their numbers and see from a rushing standpoint, could this team have done a better job of running the ball last year? Take a look at that a little bit later. And then finally, total offense per game, 387 yards per game was the average. Mississippi State was at 377. But once again, when we adjust that for opponent, that improved rushing number is spelled out in their total, 427 yards per game. Now, let's dive a little bit deeper into the numbers here, and let's take a look at some of our advanced metrics. Average team last year, drives ending with either a touchdown or a field goal. So they're scoring drives. About 40% of their drives would end in either a touchdown or field goal. Mississippi State was at 46.6%. So solid job there. Average team last year with their drives ending with a touchdown. So putting up 7 instead of 3, 29%. When we look at their adjusted number, 36.5%. So excellent job there. And then third down conversions, average team was about 39%. Mississippi State just a little bit above that at 42%. So good job there. Now, here's the problem. When you run the air raid, your quarterback is not supposed to take a lot of sacks because he's getting rid of the ball on time, 3 steps, ball out. Mississippi State gave up 37 sacks last year. That is bad for any offense, but certainly for a timing and rhythm offense like the air raid is supposed to be, that is certainly not good and led to a lot of issues. This team also had 18 committed turnovers. Now let's take one more step into their advanced numbers, and we call this R3Es. How effective, explosive, and efficient were your offense last year? As far as effectiveness, Mississippi State was 58th. Explosive, they were 49th. And as far as efficiency goes, they were 41st. Mississippi State ended the regular season for us last year as the 51st rated offense in college football. I said I would take a quick look at their rushing leaders here. And when I look at their 2 leading running backs, Devin Booth and Johnny Daniels, for Booth, 152 attempts, 759 yards, rushing 5 yards per carry, which is phenomenal. 5 rushing touchdowns, averaged about 63 yards per game. on the ground. As far as Daniels, 108 rushing attempts, 540 yards rushing, also 5 yards per carry and 4 touchdowns. He averaged about 45 yards per game rushing. So there was some running game there for Mississippi State. I think when I look into the advanced numbers here, I think I'm going to see something that sticks out very clearly to me. So we'll see if my hunch is correct here. So if I had to bullet point this offense, decent production, but very poor efficiency with some of the data that I just spelled out here for you. Let's take a look at their defense and how good were the offenses that they faced last year. And using that baseline again of 68, let's walk through some of the offenses that they went up against last year. You're looking at a defense that went up against an offense in Arizona State that was 28th. Florida was 25th. Texas had the 6th best offense for us last year. Georgia was 12th. Texas A&M was 22nd. Arkansas was 35th. Tennessee had the 26th best offense last year for us. Missouri was 53rd, and then ending the regular season with Ole Miss with the number 5 ranked offense last year. Looking at an average power ranking of 38, you're now looking at a team that's probably in that 7-5 from an offensive standpoint, possibly sneaking up to 8-4. Just would really depend on that as well. Did face 2 offenses that were outside of the top 100 in Toledo and UMass. So did get a little bit of break there during their schedule. Now, for the defense, I'm just going to give you their accounting stats number and then our adjusted numbers for the defense. So points per game allowed, Mississippi State 34.1. When we adjust that for opponent, does go down just a little bit to 31.9 points per game, still well above the NCAA average. As far as passing yards per game allowed, 230, let's call it 240 yards per game. When we adjust that for opponent, just a slight improvement there to 237 yards per game. Same can be said for the rushing yardage. Mississippi State on average allowed about 217 yards per game on the ground. When we adjust that for opponent, just a slight improvement to 208 yards per game. Still well north of what the average team got last year. And then as far as total offense goes, allowed 456 yards per game. When we adjust that for opponent, goes down to 444, but still well north of what the average team would have given up last year, almost about 70 plus yards differential there. Now let's take a look at their opponents as far as the scoring and third down adjustments go. Mississippi State's opponents scored either a touchdown or a field goal on 57% of their drives. That is way high. As far as their opponents getting touchdowns, 37.7%. Again, well north of what the average was. And then their opponents on third down conversions, 42%. Again, a little bit above where the average team was last year. And this team absolutely generated no pass rush. 8 sacks in 12 regular season games. 11 when we throw out the FCS opponent. 8 sacks. That's just not putting enough pressure on the opposing team's quarterback. And when you talk about poor defense on fourth downs, folks, 16 times their opponents went for it on fourth down. They converted 14 of them. 88% conversion rate by their opponents. You're not getting off the field. That's how you give up a lot of points. And that is what we're seeing from Mississippi State. Only forced 12 turnovers last year. And when we talk about the 3 E's on defense, remember I said there's 134 Division I teams last year. Wait till you hear some of these numbers pop up here. As far as effective defense from Mississippi State, 124th. As far as giving up explosive plays, 114th. And as far as efficiency, 124th. Mississippi State ended the regular season as our 122nd rated defense in college football. If I had to sum up their defense in a bullet point, it would be one of the worst defenses in all of college football last year at this level. Let's talk about the coaching and situational play and also special teams. Let's start with the special teams. Special teams was a relative strength given it was on a 2-win team. Converted 10 out of 11 field goal tries for 91%, made 30 of 31 extra points. The punting game was a little bit of an issue. 42.4 yards per punt. Ranks about 73rd last year in the nation. So that was a problem. We talked about the turnover differential, -6 in the turnover differential. Definitely not a recipe for winning games in a big time conference. 7 penalties per game for 64 yards. You want to get that cleaned up. In one-score games, there was just one game where Mississippi State was in a game that was 1 score or less. They lost that contest. And then, of course, against quality opponents, 0-7 against quality opponents. So rough start to Jeff Lebby in his first season. As far as going forward on fourth down, one of the more aggressive coaches in making that decision last year. He was 6th out of 144 qualifying head coaches last year in Division I football. And their conversion rate, 15 out of 27, a little bit above the average there for teams last year. Let's take a look at the offense and defensive splits in the games that they won versus the games that they lost. I think I'm going to start to see some trends here. In their 2 wins, not a surprise. And especially when you look at the opponents that those wins came against and the FCS opponent and a 2-win UMass team, this offense was averaging 50.5 points per game. The passing offense, 235 yards per game on, let's call it 24 passing attempts, 10 yards per pass attempt, 16 yards per completion. The run game, 33 rushing attempts per game for 222 yards rushing, 6.8 yards per rushing attempt, 457 yards of total offense, 8.2 yards per play. If you can hear me kind of chuckling in the background, it's because you know that this is not sustainable at the big time college football level. They averaged 6 touchdowns per game and had absolutely 0 turnovers. You can see why this team is going to win only 2 games when I give you the numbers that they had when they lost. 21 points per game is what this team was scoring when they lost. 240 yards per game passing, but that came on 32 attempts. So the yards per attempt goes down to 7.5, 12.9 yards per completion. The run game, 35 rushing attempts for 121 yards, 3.4 yards per rushing attempt. So the attempts were there even in the losses, which I find a little bit fascinating. 361 yards per game in total offense. Okay. 5.4 yards per play. I'm just taking a look at the numbers to see what sticks out to me. Okay, third down conversions in their losses, converting about 35% on third downs, as well as they attempted all of their fourth down attempts in their losses. Here's the bugaboo, 18 turnovers in those 10 losses, so averaging almost 2 turnovers per game there. Let's take a look at their defensive splits, and I think we're going to see some radical swings here from when they won versus when they lost. In the games that they won, this defense was giving up less than 14 points per game, 153 yards passing on 34 attempts, let's call it, 4.6 yards per attempt, 7.8 yards per completion. The opponents running the ball was never a problem, even in the games that they won. 44 rushing attempts for 163 yards per game, 3.7 yards per attempt. About 315 yards per game allowed in total offense, 4.1 yards per play. This defense forced 2 turnovers in the 2 games that they won, which I was expecting that to be a little bit higher. Now, in their 10 losses, defense was allowing 38 points per game, 257 yards per game passing on 24 pass attempts, 9.4 yards per attempt, 12.8 yards per completion. Again, their opponents running the ball was consistent, about 43 and a half rushing attempts per game again, so no major change there. The yardage does change, 228 yards per game rushing, almost a 65-yard per game differential there. So when they stepped up in weight class, they were getting run on, 5.2 yards per rushing attempt. The total offense allowed goes up to 485 yards per game allowed, 6.8 yards per play. Their opponents converting on third downs, let's call it 48%, and a whopping 88% by their opponents on fourth down. Forced 10 turnovers. So basically they forced 1 turnover per game while their offense was turning the ball over almost 2 times per game. So really hard to win when you can't take care of the ball and when you can't generate turnovers. So let's go ahead and get to the Mississippi State Bulldogs final grade, and we're going to give their final verdict. It's not a surprise with a team that won only 2 ball games that they get a D- here from the Crunch Time Sports Advantage Network. When we take a look at where this team really struggled, it was all over the place. The rush defense was horrible. The passing game was inconsistent for most of the year. And, of course, not being able to take care of the ball. The final verdict, Mississippi State struggled in nearly every facet of the game except special teams last year. Their aggressive coaching approach did not translate in wins due to an abysmal defense that could not stop the run or create stops on fourth downs. So in our final 2 minutes here with you, I'm going to give you 3 keys for Mississippi State to improve on. First and foremost, you got to improve that defensive personnel and scheme. Whatever you were running last year just was not getting it done. Key number 2, find consistency in the passing game. When I look at their quarterback, Michael Van Buren Jr., in 10 games completed, folks, for an air raid offense that is designed to get the ball into the hands of running backs, tight ends, and receivers, 55% completion percentage, 1,886 yards passing, 11 touchdowns, 7 INTs. If they don't get better quarterbacking play, this is once again going to be a very long season for the fans there in Stark Vegas. Key number 3, continue the aggressiveness, but improve the execution. If you're going to go for it that many times on fourth downs, you absolutely have to get better conversion rates there out of your team. If Mississippi State can improve in these 3 areas, they can start to climb out of the basement in the Southeastern Conference.
Thank you for tuning into this podcast. We hope you enjoyed today's episode and our deep dive into all things college football. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review the show on your favorite podcast platform. And if you're watching on YouTube, be sure to like this video and hit that subscribe button. You can follow us on Twitter at CrunchTimeVIP for updates, insights, and more content. And make sure to visit our website at crunchtimesportsadvantage.com for in-depth blogs, game previews, and information about our Crunch Time Express handicapping packages. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time for our next patient on the 2024 College Football Autopsy.